I'm honored to be joined right now by a very special guest, Attorney Joeseph McBride. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jason. Glad to be with you today.
I know you're very busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to speak with us. You are right now embarking on one of the most important cases really in the history of the country. And before we get into the details of the case, I want to talk a little bit about you because you haven't necessarily had the easiest path in life to where you are right now. Your parents fostered many troubled children, including, why don't you give us a little bit of the background of your story so people can understand where you're coming from before we get into Richard Barnett and the case and all that?
Sure. So, I come from the New York City area. I was raised in between Brooklyn and Eastern Long Island. My mom and dad, my dad is Irish. My mother is Puerto Rican. They married during a time where that was taboo, but, love sort of trumps and triumphs over all things. We come from a Catholic family. We're a devoted family. And my mom at some point learned that she couldn't have more children. So they wanted to be parents to more children. And as such, they became foster parents for about 10 or 15 years. And we had a bunch of boys come through our house from every walk of life, from every stripe of race, color, creed, so on and so forth. And my brother Anthony, we adopted him when he was 8 years old. He came to us when he was 6, born addicted to drugs, alcohol. Mom and dad were absolutely terrorized him. We brought him in, loved him as our own, gave him our name. He's my brother, and I think the world of him. I absolutely love him. At some point in his life, right around the age of 24, 25, he was accused of a crime that he absolutely did not commit. My brother Anthony is a paranoid schizophrenic. I apologize about the noise. He is a paranoid schizophrenic, and accompanying that comes a host of cognitive issues and the ability to process and think through and digest the information that's put in front of you in any situation, whether you're going to the supermarket to buy groceries, whether you're going to invest in stocks or bonds, and certainly when you've been accused of a crime. He was threatened with 125 years in jail. He was told that if he signed the paper, wrote X, signed at Y, that he would get 15. He thought it was a good deal at the time. And he got 15 years in prison for a crime he absolutely did not commit. Horrified at the situation, shocked and in disbelief. Looking at my mom and dad, their level of heartbreak, two good parents who've given their world and God and their country everything to sort of just reach this level of heartbreak it moved me, it infuriated me, it caused me to change my life. And in that moment, I decided that I would drop my previous career, that I would go to school and become a lawyer and get my brother out. By the time, that took me 10 years. By the time I graduated law school and took the bar and was able to meaningfully help him, he had maxed out of his prison sentence. He did 10 years on the 15. And I've dedicated my life to helping people who've been accused of crimes, rich or poor, rural or urban. If I look at you and if I am moved, if I feel like the government is unfairly coming down upon you, if I can do it, I will certainly come to your aid.
And I want to thank you for doing that because I have encountered so many, not just lawyers, I don't want to single out lawyers. There are so few people in any field, Joseph, that have any integrity whatsoever. The sacrifice that you've made in your life and the sacrifice that you're making even now to defend Richard Barnett and to stand up for the individuals who have been accused for the incidents that occurred on January 6th. It takes a lot of courage because you came out of the public defender's office where you were doing all this stuff that you're talking about, legal aid society, helping pro ses who couldn't help themselves. And now we have a bunch of people who in some cases were invited into the building by the police. And in this photograph, Richard looks like he's been beaten up. Can you give us some details of what's going on? I know this is an ongoing case, so if there's anything that I bring up that you can't discuss, just say that and we'll move on. But what can you tell us about what's happened so far, the condition of Richard, and the status of the case?
Sure. So, Richard was obviously one of the people who walked to the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. He showed up there to protest what he thought, to protest and to exercise his First Amendment right to free speech and to petition his government for redress. And
which, incidentally, sorry to interrupt, we don't even have that here on YouTube. I detect you want to talk. We can't mention the F word as it relates to the election, or this whole video will be deleted. So we really are in a post-constitutional America. What you're endeavoring to do is like trying to put out a fire on the surface of the sun. Right.
It's a curious place we find ourselves. But when you have a fundamental belief that America was founded on good principles for the purpose of freedom and self-expression, all the things that are codified in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and other inspired legal documents, and when you believe that God had a hand in that, you stand up and you defend it, even in its darkest, especially in its darkest hour. And like you just said, we live in a post-constitutional, very Orwellian world where our thoughts are monitored, where our words are monitored, where if you say something that does not agree with the party line, these companies, these big tech companies who are essentially agents of the federal government, will shut you down on behalf of the federal government. And it's an unfortunate but temporary situation. Temporary. I don't believe at no part of my being, no morsel of my soul believes that this will last forever. Not even close to it. This kind of thing always cannibalizes itself. It will cannibalize itself. America will stand. Free speech will stand victorious in the end. There's no other outcome.
Absolutely, and I think it's only going to happen with the hard work of honest lawyers like you. And I know we want to be careful about the details we go into with the case, but just in reading this New York Post article about Richard, it seems that he was lured to pose at the desk by a photographer for AFP, which is like the association, it's like the French AP. Can you give us any details with that?
Sure. So, Richard was toward the front of the Capitol. And at some point he got pushed in. That's clear on the evidence. I have a video that's, I can make it available to you. It's available for public consumption, where you hear him being pushed in. He's saying, they're pushing, we can't go back. I guess we're going in now. They're pushing.
Wow. And
the moment he actually crosses the threshold, he stumbles back and falls because he tried to go against the crowd. Be that as it may, the U.S. Attorney's Office has, put forth the theory that he ran over in some kind of frenzied Braveheart charge, which just is not the truth. So him and other insurrectionists, quote unquote, but a lot of these people, the doors were open. They either got pushed in or they just walked through because everybody around them was walking through. The mayor of Washington, D.C. had pulled the porta potty before so as to discourage people from being out there all day. So after entering the Capitol, his first thought was, let me help this woman who's about to get trampled. He actually does that. Second thought was, gee, I've been out here for all day, basically. I need to use a restroom. So him and a couple other people started looking for the bathroom. They approached the Speaker Pelosi's office. She has a series of offices over there. The name tag that says Speaker of the House, or identifying it as Speaker Pelosi's office, was removed at that time. He walked in, didn't know where he was. There was AP or AFP in the office, and somebody invited him to sit down and said, "Do you know where you're at?" And he was informed. He said, "No, I didn't know where I'm at." He said, "How about that?" And he said, "How about you take a picture?" So, I'm paraphrasing here. And he sits down, and the cameraman tells him to act natural. And you can see in his hand, he's not taking a selfie at that time because he's got a cell phone in his hand. He puts his hand back. He takes a picture. That has now become the face of the insurrection, which is, it's good. It's good for TV. It's good for the media. But we're talking about a 60-year-old man with no criminal record, who's never been in trouble with the law in his life, who showed up with an American flag in his hand to petition his government for redress, who walked into an open door. And yes, he sat down and took a picture, but that's not an act of violence. That is not the breaking of a window, the smashing of a door. That is not the lighting of a fire or the pushing of an open officer. That is none of those things. Despite this, they held him for 108 days in what I have come what us defense lawyers have come to call DC Gitmo or the Washington DC Gulag, where they just take you pre-trial, totally flouting your constitutional rights, totally flouting the presumption of innocence, totally flouting federal law and the Bail Reform Act, and they throw you in a hole and they torture you day in and day out until either you cop a plea or your lawyer gets you out.
Wow. And what can we say about this photograph? Because this looks to me like a booking photo, and Mr. Barnett appears to have a mark on his head here. It looks like he might have been, it looks to me like he's been punched and allowed to heal for a few days before they took this. That's my assumption. I don't know.
Yeah, that photo right there is he drove home the night of the 6th. It was a long drive. And he turned himself in the morning of the 8th. He didn't get home until more than halfway through the day, through the mid-evening on the 7th. And he turned himself in the next day. I mean, I don't know what that is, to tell you the truth. It's likely just a consequence of all the things that happened that day, because
the crowd.
He was maced. Officers were engaged with the crowd. Yeah, he was maced I think twice, pretty badly. Wow. And it's likely just a consequence of that day.
The very fact that he turned himself in shows that he's cooperative. They've categorized him as a terrorist on the same level as the perpetrators of 9/11. They've basically destroyed this guy's life. And it seems to me, I'm not an attorney, obviously, but it seems to me that there's virtually no way that Richard Barnett or anybody can get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. The fact is, when you're quoting statements from the case, you're using their language. I know you don't believe this, but they've already determined that this was an insurrection. Isn't that a legal conclusion that a defense attorney like yourself would argue this was not an insurrection? This is a guy who just got pushed in the door.
Sure. They have spun the narrative in that direction in order to create conditions of dangerousness and frenzy where none exist. It is a fact that no defendant charged in connection with any allegation related to January 6th has actually been charged with insurrection. Not a single person. It's a charge, and they are free to use it, and they haven't used it. But yet they call this an insurrection. It is the difference between somebody who gets into a shouting match and you call that person a murderer. It's not right. You shouldn't do that. They do it nonetheless because they are working very closely with their arm of the media, and the federal government has no check on it. Federal government is the federal government. When a state government acts up, it's the federal government who comes down to check them or to bring them down or whatever they're going to do. But in this set of circumstances, the federal government says, we're the biggest guy in the room. We're the bully on the playground. Nobody's going to tell us nothing. So we're going to do whatever suits our needs best. Fortunately, there are a group of us attorneys who have the courage and the education and the will to stand up against this. And look, this behavior on the federal government's part is not novel to this case. They do this all the time. I represented people accused of you name it, I've represented them. And the federal government does this on a regular basis. It's an unfortunate and despicable practice that should one day end.
Yeah. And I mean, we've spoken a lot on Crowdsource the Truth about this revolving door where opportunistic attorneys in Washington, D.C. often take the opposite tact that you've taken. I mean, you mentioned in this New York Post article how some of your colleagues advised you not to even take this case. That's disheartening for members of the public to learn that attorneys are making these types of considerations. I mean, we've seen it with Donald Trump. They try to put pressure on anybody who would defend him. So even though we have the right to a legal defense, if somebody can create a political climate where it's just so untenable for somebody like you to defend a person. They've effectively blocked the ability of that individual to get a legal defense, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. But if you've ever been in a dark room, no matter how dark the room, and somebody strikes a match at any point in time, that match will be seen from anywhere. And all it takes is a little bit of light and a little bit of fire to change people's perspective. And then when you turn the lights on in that room and people see how filthy it is, then they could say, oh my God, I had no idea I was living in such filth. Let's clean this up. So, we have to continue to march on. We have to continue to engage the federal government and zealously defend our clients no matter what the odds. I counted the costs. Yes, many of my colleagues told me I was nuts for taking this case. But I did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. And then when you look at organizations like the ACLU, who rightfully 10, 15 years ago were calling out the surveillance state that we now live in and saying, hey, we understand that there's a large part of the population out there that are afraid of religious Muslims because of what happened during 9/11. But they scapegoated that population of people in order to create the surveillance state, the increasing use of FISA courts, the Patriot Act, the NSA domestically spying on United States citizens. All of that went unchecked, and we just turned a blind eye to it because in the name of national security. And the question always was, and the question that the ACLU rightfully posed back in 2010, 2008, 2012 was, hey, pump the brakes here. What happens if this ever gets turned on us? And now that it's getting turned on us, they remain silent. They're not saying anything. It's disgusting. These January 6ers are still being arrested. Some of them have been in solitary confinement for 60 and 75 days. And the ACLU has volumes of research out clearly articulating, based on voluminous research, that solitary confinement is indeed torture. Yet no one speaks up. Or if they speak up now, they do it out of a sense of, oh, I have to say something. But it's not a meaningful contribution. There's no one else is stepping up. So it's a lonely fight right now. There's a few of us fighting against the masses, but hey, that's okay. In the end, truth, light, and justice have a way of prevailing.
You're an extremely brave guy because it's not too many people that want to stand up. And I want to make sure that Crowdsource the Truth viewers know that they can support your effort and they can support Richard by going to bigobarnett.com, bigobarnett.com. That's the Legal Defense Fund. People can donate and help you fight this fight. Even if people don't support what happened on January 6th, if you don't know the facts or whatever, if you're interested in people having the right to a fair trial and having a legal defense, I personally think it's very important that you contribute to this fund. This is not a tax-deductible 501c3. This is just a payment to pay for the legal defense. So you're giving money to Richard Barnett to pay his attorneys. I just want everybody to understand that. I personally support this effort. I support what you're doing. And I have to say, Joseph, you're an extremely brave guy. I want to talk about another thing that you just raised, this concept of expanding powers after 9/11. The same exact thing is happening right now, by the way. The U.S. Capitol Police, in my personal experience, are at best incompetent. And frankly, I have evidence and information unrelated to January 6th, stuff that happened 3 years ago, that causes me to believe that they are deeply corrupt. We've heard many stories of the U.S. Capitol Police allowing people in, and now there have been articles about the future of the U.S. Capitol Police. I don't know if people, even in the United States, realize this is a very unique police force in that they have worldwide jurisdiction as it is. They're charged with protecting the square mile surrounding the Capitol, but also each and every member of Congress wherever they should travel. So they already are sort of like this mini FBI, and now we see that they have intentions to expand their investigative powers and do all kinds of things I think Lego owners around the country are nervous that they can just come in and seize their toys at any moment. What can you say about this, Joe?
Well, what can I say about it is this: it's a dark and ominous prelude of things to come. It should be treated. The points that you are raising should be treated very, very seriously. What does a police force that has international jurisdiction need to increase its presence within domestic United States borders? There are a lot of moves that take place on a regular basis, especially by this administration. And I try not to over politicize things. I really do. But when you are making moves on a regular basis that are anti-American, that do not advance American interests, one has to ask the question, well, why would you be doing this? Why are you trying to diminish our role and our capacity in the world unless your loyalties lie somewhere else? And the fact that you see an increase in the surveillance state, you see an increase in an international police force, you see an increase in the size of government, you see a decrease in our constitutional rights, you see the founding fathers in their efforts demonized, racialized, as if these men and women accomplished nothing good. It's preposterous. It reminds me of when Joseph Stalin was done with you, and if you were in a painting with him, he would simply have the painting removed, have you scrubbed out, put a tree where you were, and put it back there, because that's his narrative of things, and that's just ridiculous. That's not.
Well, we see that happening right here. We see that happening right here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but is this not the White House publishing a legal conclusion that prejudices any jury against your client?
It absolutely is, and they will be held accountable for that. Lots of times you would hear whoever was in office, whether it was Barack Obama, or George Bush, or Donald Trump, whoever was in office, anytime one of these guys would speak out on an active criminal investigation or criminal case, people would say, hey, wait a second, you're a sitting president. You don't get to do that. Like, there's a whole nother branch of government that takes care of these things, and you have the U.S. Attorney's Office from your executive branch assigned to investigate and to prosecute via the DOJ. You should not be talking about this stuff, right? Because you will prejudice an untold amount of people. It could now be said that if you voted for Biden and you stand by that statement, then you should very well be disqualified from the jury. So, they like to put their foot in their mouth a lot. So let's see how that works out for them.
Yeah, and I mean, we are living in post-constitutional America, so there's all these things that happen that should allow you to move for a change of venue or even trigger a mistrial. But we haven't seen a lot of that lately. It seems like members of Congress and sitting presidents can say whatever they want, no matter how prejudicial it might be. And it really can harm the case. It can harm the defendants. I mean, Richard he has no criminal record, correct? He's just a guy who's installing windows in Arkansas. He's a family man. He's hanging out with dogs and hot rods and stuff like that. I hope that viewers will contribute to his legal defense, because it's really all that we can do right now as we, the people, is to have legal warriors like you who are defending these people who are essentially casualties of lawfare. And this is a topic that keeps coming up: abuse of the civil and here criminal justice system.
Sure. There are three groups of people who went to the Capitol on January 6th. We laid this out in our motion. And the first group is people who went to petition the government for redress. They did not get involved in any controversy that day. They went home that night or the next day or whatever. The second group are the people from the left and the right and the center who developed their own nefarious purposes and went there to stir up trouble, and they achieved that end. The third group is the group of people who went there with no prior knowledge of any bad things happening, certainly no insurrection or attack on the Capitol or riot or any of those things happening. They went to petition the government for redress in lawful assembly with their fellow citizens and people from all over the world, and they somehow ended up in the greater events of that day. Richard Barnett, along with the vast majority of other people who have been charged with January 6th related crimes, is a member of the third group. This is a lawful, law-abiding citizen who loves his family, who loves his country, who works hard, who lives in rural Arkansas, who's never bothered the government in his life. This is somebody who on a regular basis is out in the street, marching and raising funds to get local police officers body cams. There's documented proof that he's done that. He has a good working relationship with local law enforcement, fire department. He's a retired firefighter. He's a stand-up guy. Yes, he ended up in Speaker Pelosi's office that day, but that is all explainable. You do not have to agree with any of his actions or the greater actions of any of the people that day. As a matter of fact, you can condemn all they did, but at the end of the day, what he did was a glorified trespass, which is routinely treated, especially at the Capitol, with a slap on the wrist and a ticket, and you're sent home. And they are charging him with crimes where if he got the statutory maximum, he could face over 20 years in prison. It's very, very, very wrong.
Well, and not only that, when it's viewed in contrast of the absolute chaos and destruction that we all witnessed last summer, that I think people are holding their breath that we won't see again this year, it's hard to imagine why even the individual who now holds the office of vice president, I almost have to choke when I say that, was raising funds to bail people out of jail. I mean, they were saying, oh, no, this is a mostly peaceful protest. Don't worry about all those stores burning down in the background and people who were retired police officers and security guards who were killed. We saw entire areas of major U.S. cities taken over, police stations with the cops driven out. I don't see any of those people under indictment. And as a matter of fact, more related to January 6th, I personally have interviewed this guy, John Earl Sullivan, who's made a lot of statements that seem to be against his best interest. He was aware that there were social media postings that there was going to be an attack on the Capitol building well prior to January 6th. He admits that in this video. He's published lots of videos of himself on his own YouTube channels and elsewhere, training people how to dress up in black bloc and avoid being detected by the police. I don't have it queued up here, but people who've seen the interview are aware that he did that. He's basically telling people how to avoid getting arrested, how to handle firearms and stuff like that. This is an insurrectionist. The guy runs a website called Insurrection USA, but meanwhile, he's paid as much as $90,000 by CNN and NBC News to record ostensibly the assassination of Ashley Babbitt. I think Rabbit, right. Here he is, putting on the black bloc, demonstrating the use of firearms, clearly showing how to avoid detection. He tells people specifically not to have any logos on their clothing so the police can't find you, so cameras can't find you. Richard wasn't doing any of this stuff. Richard was not at the tip of the spear telling people to burn the Capitol down, which this guy was. But he was let out of jail well before Richard. He was allowed back on social media, which initially they told him he couldn't do that. It's very strange to see this uneven handling of people who seem to be affiliated with, or at least ideologically aligned with, Antifa and anarchy and the destruction of the country, whereas you've pointed out, Richard was there because he felt that something went wrong in 2020. And now we've got a president who, instead of saying, hey, that's a ridiculous claim, we're interested in an open and transparent audit of the results of anything, he just keeps on shouting that it's a big lie. Sounds like somebody who's protesting too much to me.
Yeah, for sure. Look, this individual, John Earl Sullivan, dressed up like that, Black Bloc obviously has a reputation for what they do and how they hide their identities. If you were ever going to compare somebody to a terrorist, take one look at this video. This guy looks like I mean, that kind of dress. I mean, you can put him in the room with almost any terrorist organization, be it ISIS or FARC. That is the uniform, right? Did Richard Barnett show up in militarized gear that day? No, he absolutely did not, because he had no militarized intent. Despite this, he is being treated as if he fed into Mr. Sullivan's message to the public here, hook, line, and sinker. It is utterly ridiculous. The fact that he's allowed to continue on social media, and the fact that he's being funded by other news organizations, shows you how deep this stuff goes. And regarding Vice President Harris's support the creation of a bail fund for people who burned down cities and who hurt other people. What I'll say is this. I think the strongest thing you can do, that any of us can do in regarding the comparison to Black Lives Matter and Antifa and what happened on January 6th, is to say that those people were well within their rights to petition, to even act violent. They burned, they pillaged, and social media, the regular media and the government said, look, we need to understand the root causes for this. And because these root causes are rooted in the First Amendment, we're going to give them a pass. Now, why do I say that? Because if you apply that same language, and if you apply that same application to the people who were involved in January 6th, everybody, without question, in every set of circumstances, should be let out. And Kamala Harris and her cohort of people went as far as to create a bail fund to get these individuals out. And now she's Vice President of the United States. You know what? I have to say, I actually commend her, and I commend them on that. Do you know why? Because they take care of their own. They take care of their own. I'll tell you who does not take care of their own. Okay? There's been nobody from the conservative movement. There's been nobody from the Republican movement. There's been President Trump. I have held back. We have held back as a unit our frustration with the lack of support from that side. No meaningful politician, with the exception of Senator, I believe his name is Johnson, and correct me if I'm wrong, he has been speaking out. Well, with the exception of that individual who I've watched many, many times, that the letters that he's wrote, the things that he said, I commend him for that. But he is alone. No one else has stepped up in a meaningful way. And at this point, if you do not speak up, your silence equivocates to tacit approval. You are giving them the thumbs up to hunt down, lock up, and throw into the gulag innocent people accused of crimes because they went out to stand up for what they believed in. And it's wrong. So, my message to these Republican and conservative and libertarian politicians who consider themselves to be right of center, a reckoning is coming. The voting base is furious. Everyone I speak to is furious. If these people don't step up, they're going to be voted out. There is no doubt about it.
I share your frustration, Joe, because, Donald Trump recently announced this lawsuit where he proclaims to be defending the First Amendment, but he basically is asking the public to give him money, and he's a billionaire still, to do something that he should have done when he was the president of the United States. He should have taken action against Twitter and said, listen, you can't silence the president of the United States while you continue to publish pornography and exploit this protection from the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, which allows them to remove material on the basis of, a good faith effort if they think it's offensive. So I don't know how they're going to defend in court this concept that child pornography is not offensive, but First Amendment protected speech by the President of the United States is. My disappointment is that President Trump has waited a little too long to do this. And now, as you said, people who were there in Washington, D.C. supporting not only their own First Amendment rights, but him as president, have been basically left high and dry. And that is a very upsetting situation. Now, you're only defending Richard, right? There are plenty of other people who are in jail.
Yes. So I am defending Richard Barnett. My colleague Stephen Metcalf is defending Jacob Lang, and another member of our team, Martin Tankleff, is defending Dominic Pizzola, one of the guys who's being accused of being a Proud Boy. So that is our immediate group of guys. Obviously, and because of conflicts, we each represent those guys individually, but smart attorneys who are working on these cases have joint defense agreements, and they're able to share information and compare and contrast notes, because we do not believe that the government is giving us the full breadth of the discovery. As a matter of fact, we are grateful for the fact that citizens have reached out to us and sent us videos and pictures of materials, and I know that if they have them, the government surely has them as well. And we are waiting for the government to fail to disclose exculpatory information, because that would be a violation under U.S. v. Brady. It's something the federal government is notorious for doing.
Right.
But this time, because of the amount of surveillance involved and the amount of electronic data, if they do it, they're going to be caught red-handed. And believe me, I'll be there with a smile on my face to hold them accountable for it.
That's a great point, because they are doing it all the time, but this is one of the most photographed events, if not ever, certainly in recent history. So I want to make sure our viewers know they can go to your website, McBrideLawNYC.com. They can contact you through the website if they have video or any useful information. People can also follow you on Twitter, McBrideLawNYC. You've just started this Twitter account, so people might want to get on there and they can communicate with you. I see you're retweeting Rudy Giuliani, who also has been unjustly stripped of his bar license without due process. It really is stunning. I mean, it's one thing for me to say we're in post-constitutional America, but even if people hate what happened on January 6th, even if they dislike me, if they dislike you, if they dislike Richard Barnett, if they don't want to be the next person to have their door kicked in and their Lego set taken and themselves thrown into jail where they can be completely misrepresented as racists and subject to beating and torture and all of the things that we've heard about that are really, truly scary. Unless people want to see the legal system break down into something far worse than what the founding fathers of this country rebelled against the King of England to prevent, I really think that they should visit the legal defense site at bigobarnett.com. And even if you send $5, every little bit is going to make a difference and help Joseph defend Richard Barnett. If you go there, bigobarnett.com. You can't even use GoFundMe because, they're notoriously left-wing and shutting these things down. They did.
Shut us down. And we had PayPal as a provider on our site. They shut us down as well. So now we're using Give, Send, Go. They're a Christian, sort of ran organization. And we're grateful for them. And, so you click on that, it'll take you to our Give, Send, Go page. And that's where you actually give, because, they don't want us to be able to raise money to fight, because they know that if we can level the playing field in terms of a budget, amounts a meaningful enough defense, that they will be defeated because they're lying through their teeth about everything.
I got to pause you on that for a second, Joe, because what you're describing is so sinister. I mean, it's nothing new. We've heard this before. Laura Loomer had her payment systems shut down. People who have started GoFundMes for these sort of things have had them shut down. But the problem is these providers, these banks, whatever they are, they've already come to a legal conclusion as to the guilt or innocence of your client, and they've denied him his right to have money. That's outrageous.
That's correct. Well, they're all part of the international banking system, and their loyalties do not lie to the United States. That is for certain. So, what I can say is this. They are overstepping. And what I mean by that is this. There's a concept, there's a hearing that you get in New York law, and there's an analogous one in federal law as well. The name escapes me, called a state action hearing. So if you walk into a department store and if a security guard grabs you, detains you, holds you, and then eventually the cops come and arrest you, you have the right to cross-examine that security guard in what's called a state action hearing in court. Essentially, the logic behind it is the law says that that person was essentially an agent of the NYPD at the time. They're an agent of the government. And because they're acting on behalf of the government, holding this person to that time, investigating this person until such a time that the actual police show up, that they are bound by certain laws. And if they don't follow them, then you can move for suppression of evidence under relevant case law. Here, you have a scenario where where big tech and some of these payment providers are clearly acting in concert with the federal government on behalf of the federal government. Not only are they doing this in an investigative capacity, where they or suppressatory capacity, where they're suppressing information, they're not letting people get their viewpoints out on Twitter and on other social media organizations. They're actually defunding defendants. They're actually defunding organizations. And because of that, you're now taking an active role in assisting the government as their agent. You're doing this on two fronts now. And, I'm inclined to speak to a few other attorneys and sue them under this theory, because I believe that the nexus is strong enough to make that connection. And if you can make that connection, then the Constitution will apply. And if the Constitution does apply to them, then they are up the creek without a paddle.
That's great. And you know what? This is something that's come up in the Donald Trump lawsuit against Twitter, because certain members of Congress and various people in the government sort of compelled Twitter. This is their legal argument. Because those members of Congress compelled Twitter to act, and then Twitter did act, they are essentially a proxy of the government. So,
agency, yep.
Right. I mean, until someone is convicted, it doesn't really, why can this website decide arbitrarily who they do business with or not? That seems to be discrimination.
You can't. And, they're doing this in the free marketplace of ideas. The free marketplace of ideas, the public forum used to be, it changes every 50 years or so, right? At one point it was the town crier, another point it was cafes, and another point it was here, another point it's there. Now the public forum is the internet. And if you are, preventing public discourse in the public forum, if you are silencing people in violation of their First Amendment rights on behalf of the government, then the Constitution applies to you and you must be held accountable. This is only a matter of time. I'm not sure what their end game is here, because this is only a matter of time before these, before lawyers like myself and other lawyers who are far more superior to me in intelligence can really turn the screws to them on every level. And I say that because I'm a humble guy, But this is only a matter of time. They can't do this forever. It's not going to work. They don't get to rewrite the laws. And you can see the Supreme Court now. The Supreme Court now, it's got a stiff upper lip. It is smacking down on a lot of stuff, and it is approving a lot of the right stuff. So I am very interested to see, because we are baking in a very meaningful way constitutional arguments to every motion that we write in this case, because it's not that we want to get denied, but if we do get denied, we're going to have so many arguments that the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction over that we plan on going there. We really, really do. And, that will be a good day.
Wow. I mean, if there was ever a case destined for the Supreme Court, it seems like this is it.
Certainly, it very well could be.
What is next in the case? What's the next hearing or whatever?
So we're in a holding pattern right now. The federal government is in the current process of acquiring discovery, which is largely video and photo evidence, and they dump thousands and thousands and thousands of files on us every time we see them, every few months or so. And then
basically
once that
just to overwhelm
stops,
your office, right?
Of course. Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, but that's okay,
right,
because you know what? We're going to get through it. I have the luxury of having my guy out. I got him out, right? So I don't have to sort of hit the gas to get through everything in a way that's anything less than best, because he's not locked up in the gulag. Where Somebody like Jake Lang is drinking brown water in a moldy cell, and he has to strain it through his sock before he drinks it.
Whoa.
It's disgusting. It's horrific. These guys, if you were to see the way that these guys look, they look like cavemen. Their beards, their hair are out to here. If these guys ever get let out, right? When these guys do get let out and they come to see the light of day, if the cameras are there to behold these guys who've been locked up for this long, people's jaws are going to hit the floor on how bad these guys look.
What is that guy's name? Jake what?
Jake Lang. Jacob Lang.
Lange?
Yeah. Yep. He's represented by Stephen Metcalf.
I mean, I've heard some of these terrible stories. I'm Googling his name. It's not even giving me any information about Jake Lang, January 6th, because they don't want us to see it.
Yeah, Google, I'll send you the information. Google has moved to suppress and take these they do it all the time because they're afraid and because they are as un-American as somebody who throws apple pie on the floor. So
exactly. Well, Joseph, I have to say, I'm really pleased that you and I have come into contact. I have to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to remind people that they can contact you on your website, McBrideLawNYC.com, if they have any information or anything that can help. That's a great way to get in touch. People can also go to Big O Barnett. This is Richard Barnett's Legal Defense Fund website. You can contribute to his legal defense, and I think it's very important that people do that. We've got big tech colluding with the government to basically stamp these guys down in a horrendous way that should send chills down everybody's spine. You can also follow Joseph on Twitter. He is there at McBride Law NYC, and it's a new Twitter account. So let's get on there and keep the conversation going. There's a lot of video that's been shared on Crowdsource The Truth. People have seen the videos of what went on. It was very clear to me. I was there January 6th, and it was very clear to me. I spoke to individuals who were quite clearly Antifa in disguise, guys in their 20s wearing COVID-19 masks when basically everybody who was there to support Donald Trump, we were outside, we were socially distancing, but I didn't really see people wearing these masks. That was all lefties and Antifa in disguise, if you ask me. And I interrogated some of them personally. Their statements did not ring true. John Sullivan's statements to me in the interview in March did not ring true. I believe that individual was there as a provocateur. We've had other people come on this show and describe how they were shoved inside the Capitol building against their will. Other people who have said the U.S. Capitol Police allowed them in. So this is a case that we're going to keep our eyes on, and I hope that you'll have an opportunity to join us again in the future. Anything you want to say, Joseph, before we wrap it up tonight?
Yes. So what I want to say to your listeners is this. Be not afraid. Do not be afraid to express your view online in the free marketplace. If confronted at your job, amongst your friends and your family, if you let them make you afraid, you are running from the battle. Now, make no mistake about it. We are all in a fight together. Some of us are fighting for fighting legal things, fighting for their freedom. Other people are fighting for their careers. Other people are fighting amongst family members at home. And I understand that that's difficult, but you cannot be afraid. I get so many calls and so many emails all the time of people who say, I want to contribute, but I'm afraid my name's going to be on a list. I want to say this, but I'm afraid my name is going to be on a list. Don't be afraid. The more of us who stand up, the more of us who speak out, the more of us who vote our conscience when it's time, and the more of us who call this exactly for what it is. It matters. It matters. It matters. It matters. The numbers matter. So do not allow them to silence you ever, ever. It is not worth it. We are all in this together. I thank you for your support. I thank you for your time. And I thank you, everybody, for your, if you can't contribute, for your prayers and for your positivity. and, storm the heavens for us, because we need everything that we can get.
Absolutely. Joeseph McBride, attorney for Richard Barnett, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And certainly, if people are unable to financially contribute to the legal defense, you can always share this video, help other people to know what's going on. This is a matter of tremendous concern. So I'm really thankful that you were able to join us tonight. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Our best out to Richard and the other people who are caught up in this web of lies. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be back later tonight with